presenters assembled here, and I think we will have some of the companies be joining us periodically. So just to keep us on track and on time, since we have 45 minutes scheduled, I'd like to turn it over to Don Major for welcome remarks. And I will go ahead and just show the agenda here so we know where we're headed.
Good morning, everyone. This is Don Major with Ohio Aerospace Institute. I'm Vice President of Technology and Innovation Partnerships and a proud partner working with our friends at Canada, Quebec, and the Department of Commerce to help forge better collaboration across the various borders here between the U.S. and Canada. And we have a webinar that we put together to really help you understand why you should come to our upcoming Canada-Ohio Aerospace Summit. And we are taping this, and we're going to put this out on YouTube and on our website for any people that could not attend this. So we look forward to answering all of your questions, and we will do that at the end of our speakers. So very simple presentation. First, doing business with the U.S. and the Canada supply chain. And we have Reiner Canu with the Canadian Consulate. We have then from the U.S. Department of Commerce, Fred Elliott, who is in Washington, D.C., and also Gina Bento joining us, who lives in Montreal and works with the Montreal cluster very closely. We'll then talk about the Canadian research opportunities with Alain Albertin with CREAC. And then a few testimonials, and then we'll come back online to answer any of your questions about the ROI for doing business with Canada. Before we move to our first speaker, if you could put up, I just had a couple of slides to show where we have been. A year ago, we started our very first Canada-Ohio Summit, and it was very well attended with over 150 companies. We did a significant number of B2B meetings with companies, and I would say it was a very, very big success for starting to forge collaborations across the border. Next slide. Out of that came a new relationship with the Department of Commerce, and we started up in September a new project with the Department of Commerce really aimed at helping U.S. companies putting in their hands assistance and helping to move to some of these new markets. And it's broad, while it's broader than Canada, I'm very pleased to say Canada was the very first market that we focused on. And since then we've been working with Gina, with Reiner, with our friends in Canada to really help forge new relationships. Next slide. And out of that, in September, next slide, we took a group of companies, and I'm glad that Belcan is on the call too, Montreal, to their Global Supply Chain Summit. And I will say, while it's very early, many of the companies came up with new leads, and we're asking all of the companies to continue to work with us so that we can help them with assistance on some of these relationships that they're forming. Next slide. And out of that meeting came a very special arrangement that we've entered into with CREAC and Aero Montreal. And again, Reiner was very involved in our very first summit, and you'll see him there. Our friends from the Department of Commerce, the industry minister for Canada and Quebec in the back row. But very important, Mike Heil, who is on the call, who is president and CEO of OAI, Suzanne Benoit, seated in the middle with Aero Montreal, and Dr. Fotan with CREAC. And what's very important is that these companies are now bringing their relationships, both on research and companies, to Ohio. So one of the reasons that you want to attend our meeting is that not only will this be as great as a year ago, but now we're bringing the key leadership of these organizations. Next slide. And there's a flyer that we sent out, and very much what we're looking for is to build on our successes from last year. I apologize, this got converted from 2007 PowerPoint back so we could show this to you. And we're really looking for here, if you on the second paragraph, to identify business and research opportunities on both sides of the border, sharing updates and best practices from industry leaders, and providing more networking opportunities. We think this will really be great for your business as well as the companies that are coming here from Canada, and we're very honored to work with our partners to put this on. So with this, I'd like to then turn it over to our friends from first Reiner to talk about, from their perspective, what they see as some of the key value in attending.
Thank you very much, Don. Can everybody hear me?
Yes.
Okay, wonderful. If we could go to the next slide. I want to emphasize that this is definitely a two-way relationship that we've got between Canada and the U.S., but make no mistake about it, this trade relationship that we have between Canada and the U.S. creates jobs for Americans. This is just a little slide that we put up in many of our presentations, and it demonstrates that 35 out of the 50 contiguous United States happen to have Canada as their largest export market. And you should be aware, in Ohio in particular, that trade with Canada supports over 300,000 jobs. Next slide, please. Very quickly, taking a look at Canada so you can get a perspective on what we're talking about. We've got about 34 million people in Canada. I know that's not as large as some parts of the U.S. and definitely not as large as the U.S. in total. But if you take a look, there's about 13 million in Ontario, another million, give or take, in Quebec, and then the combination of the next four provinces, British Columbia, Alberta, and Manitoba, and Saskatchewan, are about another 10 million folks, and then we've got another 2 million approximately in the balance of the country. Next slide, please. Because there's lots of companies going to Canada, a lot of companies coming from Canada, there's a lot of great brands that gather in Canada. All of these folks that you recognize as household names, beginning on the upper left-hand corner, are all present in Canada. Certainly Boeing is of Western Canada. GE Aviation is present in Montreal, as well as all of the rest of these wonderful brands. So Canada is aware of all of the things that go on in the U.S., and many of the U.S. companies that we deal with every day, as well as the Japanese and other foreign companies, have a presence in Canada. Next slide, please. In fact, Canadians own a whole lot of businesses in the United States, and this is just a little representation of the concentration of businesses. And I think you can see that Canadian businesses cover a good chunk of Ohio. Next slide, please. You should be aware that our trade with the U.S. is larger than our trade with the rest of the world by a whole lot. And if we take a look at particularly Michigan, Ohio, Indiana, and Kentucky, which is the territory that our consulate here in Detroit covers, that's about $66 billion worth of exports. In fact, the two-way trade between Ohio and Canada is someplace in the order of $30 billion a year. And I should tell you right now that most of that is exports from the U.S. to Canada as opposed to imports from Canada to the U.S. Next slide, please. In terms of why you should be looking at this particular summit to help you build your business, first of all, recognize that everything that is involved in building aircraft is present someplace in Canada. In fact, everything that you want to do with regard to aerospace is done in the Montreal Aerospace Hub. Overall, Canada is the fifth largest aerospace market. There's about $22 billion worth of sales that are done in Canada to the rest of the world. 51% is aircraft and parts, 18% in MRO, 15% in aircraft engines and parts, and 6% approximately in avionics and electronic systems. Next slide, please. We, of course, have the same sort of tier structure that you have. At the top of the pyramid, we have the OEMs, of course, and underneath the particular tiers that we work with most often are aerostructure, propulsion, landing gear, flight control systems, navigation and avionics, fuel systems, electrical power, and hydraulics. Below the top tier, obviously, we've got the manufacturers who do the parts and do some of the integration, and down below we have a third tier that do the actual individual parts without assembly. Next slide, please. In terms of the regional distribution of aerospace activity, our friends in Montreal cover off about 43% of the employment, about 46% of the GDP, and about a 63% of the R&D is in Montreal as well. Next slide, please. So how can you expand outside the U.S.? Well, I've just showed you a few statistics and facts, but really the process is one of evaluating your company and its offerings, understand what your unique selling proposition and value add is, define what your competitive advantages are, identify your key relationships, identify the receptive markets in terms of proximity. By the way, Montreal is only about 400 miles away from Cleveland as the crow flies. An interest in and a need for what it is that you make. Well, certainly the researchers in Quebec would love to talk to the researchers in Ohio, and supply chains being what there are always opportunities out there for those companies who are competitive. There's a need for compatible technologies, but really the issue is where do you have potential partners and potential customers? Next slide, please. Well, you're going to have a bunch of them that are coming to the summit in the end of the month, so please come to the summit and meet your potential partners. Last slide, please. If you want to get a hold of me, here are my contact details. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, Reiner.
Thank you so much, Reiner. Very, as you can see from Reiner's talk, lots of activity, lots of reasons to be connecting with Canada. Next, we'd like to have Fred Elliott share a few of his perspectives from the U.S. side.
Good morning, Don, and thank you so much. Are my slides up now, Monica?
Yes.
I apologize to others on the phone. Unfortunately, I'm not able to access the webinar, so I'm going to be shooting a little bit blind, and hopefully with Monica's help, we'll stay on schedule. We in the Commerce Department are absolutely delighted to be partnering with the Ohio Aerospace Institute, with the Government of Canada, including the Consulate in Detroit, to make this seminar next month in Cleveland be a success, and I strongly encourage you to attend if you have any interest at all in the Canadian market. Next slide. Aerospace exports are crucial to U.S. jobs. You'll see that there are more jobs supported by exports of aerospace products, far more, that are supported by exports of any other products. We in the Commerce Department are absolutely committed to increasing U.S. exports of aerospace products to sustain jobs for American workers. Next slide. Why should you export? You may want to create jobs, but you also want to make money. The first reason